Question 1. The voting age in India was reduced from 21 years to 18 years for both Lok Sabha and State Legislative Assembly elections by which of the following constitutional amendments? The correct answer is option B, 61st Amendment. Explanation: the 61st Constitutional Amendment Act, 1988, amended Article 326 of the Constitution, which deals with elections to the Lok Sabha and the legislative assemblies of the states. It reduced the voting age from 21 years to 18 years, a significant step towards greater youth participation in the democratic process. Question 2. Consider the following statements regarding the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, 1976, 1. It introduced fundamental duties in the Constitution. 2. It added the words socialist, secular, and integrity to the preamble. Which of the statements given above are correct? The correct answer is option C, both 1 and 2. Explanation: the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, 1976, often called the Mini-Constitution, made several significant changes. It inserted Part IVA, Article 51A, to introduce fundamental duties based on the recommendations of the Swaran Sin Committee. Additionally, it amended the preamble to add the words socialist, secular, and integrity. Question 3. The right to education was made a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution by which Constitutional Amendment Act? The correct answer is option C, 86th Amendment. Explanation: the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act, 2002, inserted Article 21A into the Constitution, making education a fundamental right for children between the ages of 6 and 14 years. This amendment also changed Article 45 and added a new fundamental duty under Article 51A. Question 4. The anti-defection law, aimed at preventing political defections, was introduced in the Indian Constitution by the 52nd Amendment Act of which year? The correct answer is option A, 1985. Explanation: the 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act was enacted in 1985. It added the 10th schedule to the Constitution, which lays down the provisions relating to disqualification of members of Parliament and state legislatures on the ground of defection. This law is popularly known as the Anti-Defection Law. Question 5. Which Constitutional Amendment Act not only strengthened the anti-defection law but also limited the size of the Council of Ministers at both the centre and in the states to 15% of the total strength of the respective legislative body? The correct answer is option B, 91st Amendment. Explanation: the 91st Constitutional Amendment Act, 2003, made significant changes. It limited the size of the Council of Ministers, including the Prime Minister Chief Minister, to 15% of the total strength of the Lok Sabha State Legislative Assembly. For smaller states, a minimum of 12 ministers was prescribed. It also made it mandatory for a defector to be disqualified from holding any remunerative political post. Question 6. The Goods and Services Tax, GST, a comprehensive indirect tax, was implemented in India through which of the following Constitutional Amendment Acts? The correct answer is option C, 101st Amendment. Explanation: the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act, 2016, paved the way for the introduction of the Goods and Services Tax, GST, in India. It inserted new articles like to 46A to 69A and to 79A into the Constitution, granting concurrent powers to both the Parliament and state legislatures to make laws with respect to GST. Question 7. The 97th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2011 granted constitutional status and protection to which of the following? The correct answer is option C, cooperative societies. Explanation: the 97th Constitutional Amendment Act, 2011, gave constitutional status and protection to cooperative societies. It made the right to form cooperative societies a fundamental right. Article 19(1)(c) inserted a new directive principle of state policy on the promotion of cooperative societies, Article 43b, and added a new Part IXB to the Constitution, titled the Cooperative Societies, Articles 243ZH to 243ZT. Question 8. The 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act introduced 10% reservation for economically weaker sections, EWS, in admissions to educational institutions and government jobs. This amendment modified which articles of the Constitution? The correct answer is option B, Article 15 and 16. Explanation: the 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act, 2019, inserted Article 15(6) and Article 16(6) into the Constitution. These articles enable the state to make special provisions for the advancement of any economically weaker sections of citizens, including reservation in educational institutions and appointments in services under the state, up to a maximum of 10% of the total seats posts. Question 9. Which Constitutional Amendment Act restored the power of the state governments to identify and specify socially and educationally backward classes, SEBCs? The correct answer is option D, 105th Amendment. Explanation: the 105th Constitutional Amendment Act, 2021, was enacted to clarify that the power to identify and specify socially and educationally backward classes, SEBCs, for the purpose of state lists rests with the state governments. This amendment was necessitated after the Supreme Court's interpretation of the 102nd Amendment Act, which had led to ambiguity regarding this power. Question 10. The National Commission for Backward Classes, NCBC, was granted constitutional status by which of the following Constitutional Amendment Acts? The correct answer is option C, 102nd Amendment. Explanation: the 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act, 2018, granted constitutional status to the National Commission for Backward Classes, NCBC. It inserted new Articles 338b and 342 into the Constitution. Article 338b deals with the structure, duties, and powers of the NCBC, while Article 342 empowers the President to notify the list of SEBCs for a state or union territory. Question 11. The 104th Constitutional Amendment Act extended the reservation of seats for scheduled castes, SCs, and scheduled tribes, STs, in the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies for a period of 10 years, until which year? The correct answer is option B, 2030. Explanation: the 104th Constitutional Amendment Act, 2019, extended the reservation for SCs and STs in the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies for another 10 years, i.e., till 25th January 2030. It also removed the provision for the nomination of 2 Anglo-Indian members to the Lok Sabha and 1 to the state legislative assemblies. Question 12. Which Constitutional Amendment Act abolished the right to property as a fundamental right and made it a legal right under Article 300A? The correct answer is option C, 44th Amendment. Explanation: the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, 1978, removed the right to property from the list of fundamental rights, Articles 19, 1, F, and 31. It was made a legal right, constitutional right, under a new Article 300 in Part 12 of the Constitution. This was done to overcome judicial hurdles in implementing land reforms and other socio-economic legislation. Question 13. The 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992 is primarily associated with which of the following? The correct answer is option C, Panchayati Raj institutions. Explanation: the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, 1992, gave constitutional status to Panchayati Raj institutions, PRIs. It added a new Part 9 to the Constitution, titled the Panchayats, and a new 11th schedule listing 29 functional items of the Panchayats. This amendment aimed to establish a three-tier system of Panchayats at the village, intermediate, and district levels. Question 14. Which Constitutional Amendment Act provided constitutional status to urban local bodies, municipalities, in India? The correct answer is option C, 74th Amendment. Explanation: the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, 1992, granted constitutional status to urban local bodies, municipalities. It added a new Part IXA to the Constitution, titled the Municipalities, and a new 12th schedule listing 18 functional items of the municipalities. This amendment aimed to strengthen democratic decentralization in urban areas. Question 15. The 99th Constitutional Amendment Act, which sought to establish the National Judicial Appointments Commission, NJC, was later declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. This amendment aimed to replace which existing system for judicial appointments? The correct answer is option B, collegium system. Explanation: the 99th Constitutional Amendment Act, 2014, aimed to replace the existing collegium system for the appointment of judges to the Supreme Court and High Courts with the National Judicial Appointments Commission, NJC. However, the Supreme Court, in 2015, declared both the 99th Amendment and the NJC Act unconstitutional, upholding the primacy of the judiciary in judicial appointments and restoring the collegium system. Question 16. The Women's Reservation Bill, officially known as the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, which reserves 1/3 of seats for women in the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies, was enacted as which Constitutional Amendment Act? The correct answer is option D, 106th Constitutional Amendment. Explanation: the Women's Reservation Bill, passed by Parliament in 2023, became the 106th Constitutional Amendment Act. It reserves 1/3, 33%, of the seats for women in the Lok Sabha, state legislative assemblies, and the Legislative Assembly of the National Capital Territory of Delhi. The implementation of this reservation will take place after the next census and subsequent delimitation exercise. Question 17. Match the following constitutional amendments with their respective primary provisions: 1. 73rd Amendment 2. 74th Amendment 3. 97th Amendment 4. 101st Amendment P. Goods and Services Tax Q. Constitutional status to cooperative societies R. Panchayati Raj institutions S. Urban local bodies. Select the correct match. The correct answer is option A, 1-R2-S3-Q4P. Explanation: the correct matches are 73rd Amendment, 1992 gave constitutional status to Panchayati Raj institutions, R. 74th Amendment, 1992 gave constitutional status to urban local bodies, municipalities, S. 97th Amendment, 2011 granted constitutional status and protection to cooperative societies, Q. 101st Amendment, 2016 introduced the Goods and Services Tax, GST, T. Question 18. Which of the following pairs of Constitutional Amendment Act and its primary provision is correctly matched? The correct answer is option C, 101st Amendment, Introduction of Goods and Services Tax, GST. Explanation: let's analyze each option. A. 61st Amendment, 1988, reduced the voting age from 21 to 18 years. Fundamental duties were introduced by the 42nd Amendment. B. 91st Amendment, 2003, limited the size of the Council of Ministers and strengthened the anti-defection law. Constitutional status to cooperative societies was given by the 97th Amendment. C. 101st Amendment, 2016, introduced the Goods and Services Tax, GST. This pair is correctly matched. D. 86th Amendment, 2002, made the right to education a fundamental right. The anti-defection law was introduced by the 52nd Amendment. Question 19. Consider the following constitutional amendments and their effects. 1. 42nd Amendment added socialist, secular, and integrity to the preamble. 2. 44th Amendment abolished the right to property as a fundamental right. 3. 61st Amendment lowered the voting age from 21 to 18 years. Which of the statements given above are correct? The correct answer is option D, 1, 2 and 3. Explanation: all three statements are correct. 1. The 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, 1976, indeed added the words socialist, secular, and integrity to the preamble. 2. The 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, 1978, abolished the right to property as a fundamental right, making it a legal right under Article 300A. 3. The 61st Constitutional Amendment Act, 1988, lowered the voting age from 21 years to 18 years. Question 20. The 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002 made education a fundamental right. It inserted which new article into the Constitution of India? The correct answer is option B, Article 21A. Explanation: the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act, 2002, inserted Article 21A into the Constitution, which states that the state shall provide free and compulsory education to all children of the age of 6 to 14 years in such manner as the state may, by law, determine. This made the right to education a justiciable fundamental right.